David Brody of CBN is our guest today. He is the author of a new book called Teavangelicals. I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. And joining me today is David Brody with CBN. Welcome to Faith and Freedom, David.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be with you, sir.
David, we want to talk about your book called Teavangelicals, an interesting play on words between the Tea Party and evangelicals. There's obviously a reason why, because in your book you say that a majority of people that are at the Tea Party events or that are part of the Tea Party are evangelicals, although not all of them are, obviously. But in terms of what's happening within the church, as you see it within Teavangelicals or some new awakening or ideas of getting involved, what do you see happening in the church? You cover so many different events and different leaders and so forth, and you've addressed much of this in your book. What do you see happening in the church today?
Well, these Teavangelicals are all over the place, and it's not just about the social issues of life and marriage, which are, of course, non-negotiables, but it's also talking about the fiscal issues and the immorality of the debt and just all of these types of issues that relate specifically through a biblical worldview to our fiscal austerity and our fiscal situation today. And, for example, I go on and talk about in the book how you have a Wayne Grudem, for example, out in Scottsdale, Arizona, teaching a Sunday school class, as you probably know, about politics and the Bible out there. Then, of course, there's yourself and David Barton and so many others going to these awake conferences all over the country. I talk about Sue Trombino, who I know you know well,
yes.
Down in Florida. These Women Impacting the Nation groups, these WIN talks as they call them. We have folks down in Florida, Scott Spage is down there at First Calvary, having certain faith forums down there where they're bringing folks in from the church and explaining the dire situation of our politics today. And so I can go on, but the point is that it is all over the place, and that the media loves to put evangelicals in a box, that it's always about the life issue and the marriage issue. And of course it's about the life issue and the marriage issue. There's no doubt about that. But it's more than that, and it's happening and manifesting in the church. And of course that you have the pastor policy briefings as well. People that David Lane and the American Family Association, many others that are all involved in these pastor policy briefings, where pastors are in essence becoming the next black robe regiment, or at least that's the hope, that these pastors will speak from the pulpit and really get their congregations mobilized and organized, and not be afraid of the IRS and some of the tax restrictions, if you will, that supposedly are put on pastors and churches, which actually are not as restrictive as some might think. That's
right. In fact, for those of you who are interested, you can go to Liberty Counsel's website to find more information about pastors, churches, and political activity. We have a video, a brand new one called Silence is Not an Option, and it has information about what pastors and churches can do. And you're right, David, there is more of a scare tactic with regards to the IRS than there is reality. Not one church has ever lost its tax-exempt status since 1954, when this restriction was put into the IRS code. But one of the things that we look at historically is, Jimmy Carter ultimately gave way to Ronald Reagan. The problems that we had historically as a country in Great Britain with some of the oppression ultimately gave birth to the American Revolution. And of course, what undergirded that was the Great Awakening. So there was a spiritual undergirding to the American Revolution. But it was the oppression also that also gave way to that. Ronald Reagan came on the heels of Jimmy Carter. What do you make about President Obama in terms of what we're seeing today? Is that a catalyst for some of the things that are happening today?
Well, there's no doubt about it. While a lot of this did start actually from a stealth perspective under President Bush with the bank bailouts in late 2008, it really started to steamroll with President Obama in 2009. And Matt, you make a great point. This is in essence, this Teavangelical movement, this Tea Party, is akin to the Great Awakening that happened back in our country's earliest days. And Senator Jim DeMint has talked about this. I know you have. In addition, David Barton and so many others have talked about that this really is a spiritual awakening in our country, a spiritual movement. We are seeing this, and Teavangelicals understand that. We even have Rand Paul, who's known for his libertarian views, now coming out and saying that this is indeed a spiritual movement, the Tea Party, the Teavangelicals. And so when you start to have a Rand Paul, who's known for his libertarian views, start to say that, I think that even gives it even more credibility for sure.
I think it is a spiritual awakening. awakening, and we may be on the verge of another great awakening here in this country. And oftentimes, what you see historically happening, you see this throughout the Old Testament as well, where things get very bad. People ultimately begin to realize their dependence upon God, and a revival and an awakening takes place. We may be actually seeing that. I know the response that we get in our Awake events, as you've mentioned in your book, Teavangelicals, is overwhelming. These people are excited. They're interested in doing something in their community, and they're more concerned now than ever. I mean, Liberty Counsel's been around since 1989, but I have seen a palpable difference in the churches in the last few years that I've never seen before. And is that your experience as well?
It has been, and I think, kind of going back to those moral majority days in the 70s and 80s and the Christian Coalition days and what you've been doing since the late 80s as well, I have to tell you, it's not just now social issues like it used to be back in the culture war days. It's now the culture war plus. It's the culture war plus the immorality of the debt, what's going on with our children's grandchildren and all of that. So you have, in essence, taken fiscal issues, not you, but the folks in this country, everyone from what's been going on with this Obama administration, in essence, we see a fiscal crisis molded and melded now with a social crisis in this country, and it's become too much for people, and it's gotten to the point where people are starting to get off the couch, and quite frankly, Matt, I think we're in the infancy of this. I think this is not a 4-year proposition or an 8-year proposition. I think we're talking about this being generational.
Well, in your book, Teavangelicals, and we're talking to David Brody of CBN, and his book is Teavangelicals. I would encourage you to get a copy of the book. You can get that on the internet through one of the online bookstores, or you can go to Liberty Counsel, and the website is lc.org, or call us at 800-671-1776 and ask for the book Teavangelicals. I would encourage you to get it. David, in your book, you've talked about a couple of things, and I want to touch on just one thing here. You said that in America, God is getting smaller and the government is getting bigger. Is that part of this realization as to our reliance upon God? There are people that are wanting to make government the end-all and be-all, and yet there's people of faith that are saying, no, that's not the way that we want to live. That's not the way it ought to be.
Well, that's right, and it seems like such a no-brainer for evangelical Christians to feel that way. But President Obama has pushed the envelope beyond belief, quite frankly, and look what we see with Obamacare. This is really his signature issue, and really you can make the argument that it's a signature issue for Teavangelicals as well. It combined quite a few different Teavangelical principles and why they're involved in the Tea Party, because first of all, it's an affront to them on the issue of abortion, as we see of what's going on as it relates to some of the mandates in place for abortion coverage. Same thing with religious freedom as it relates to the HHS mandate and contraception involved in there. And then, of course, just this idea of that the government would actually be, in essence, responsible so much for your health care, that it goes to this government getting bigger and God getting smaller. So it really hits on all different, myriad of different issues, and it is definitely galvanized not just libertarians, but evangelicals very much so. As a matter of fact, I point out in the book that the American Family Association and many others, but the American Family Association was really instrumental in organizing a lot of those early Obamacare Tea Party type rallies. And so, a lot of people think of AFA as more of a evangelical type group, and of course they are, but I actually call them a Teavangelical type organization, just along with Ralph Reed's group and others, very much so, and of course yours is mentioned, because it's not just about social issues, it's the combination of both that really encompasses the much larger picture here.
Well, thank you for being a guest on Faith and Freedom today. Our guest has been David Brody, and the book is Teavangelicals. He's the author of that book. I encourage you to get that at the online bookstores or at Liberty Counsel. You can call 800-671-1776. lc.org is our website. He also has a story in there about how some of these people that may come to these Tea Party events, in fact, there's a story early on in the book about how someone ultimately came to give their life to the Lord through these events. So what's happening in America is an exciting time in which to be alive. Get the book, Teavangelicals. The author is David Brody. For more information, go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org. You can ask for the Liberty Alert email and the Liberator newsletter. We'll see you next time.